So, good morning, everyone. My name is Arafat. I teach history on the textbook platform. So, in this session, let us discuss a very important topic of world history, the modern world history, that is the French Revolution. That is French Revolution. So, this French Revolution is a very important topic of modern world history. So the time period of the French Revolution is 1789 to 1815. 1789 to 1815. So in today's class, let us discuss the causes of the French Revolution. But in the coming classes, we will be discussing the other aspects of the French Revolution. For the time being, for today's class, let us discuss the causes of the French Revolution. So a Russian writer, we have a Russian writer by name Kropotkin, who described the French Revolution as famously described the French Revolution as the mother of all revolutions. Basically, a Russian writer had characterized a Russian writer by name Kropotkin had characterized the, the French Revolution as the mother of all revolutions. So Kropotkin is of the view that all other revolutions, such as the Industrial Revolution or a trade revolution, or for example, Russian Revolution, were confined only to a particular area, and they were confined only to a specific part of the world. Let me repeat this point once again. The Russian writer Kropotkin had characterized the French Revolution as the mother of all revolutions. He argues that all other revolutions, be it the Industrial Revolution or a trade revolution or say a political revolution like Russian Revolution, were confined to specific sectors and were confined to a specific region. So, for example, the Industrial Revolution was confined to industry and trade. The Russian Revolution was specifically confined only to politics. Only to politics. Politics. Point. On the other hand, Kropotkin argues that the French Revolution was not confined to any one specific area. Kropotkin argues that unlike other revolutions, Kropotkin argues that the French Revolution was not confined to any specific sector or to region. Kropotkin argues that the impact of the French Revolution was felt beyond one region or one sector. Basically, Kropotkin argued that the impact of the French Revolution was felt beyond one sector or one region. He argues that uh, its impact affected many aspects of life, particularly in Europe, particularly in Europe. Basically, he argues that the impact of the French Revolution was widespread. He argued that the impact of the French Revolution was felt globally and particularly more so in Europe. So that was how Kropotkin had characterized the French Revolution. So the French Revolution was a revolution against the political anarchy and despotism. The French Revolution was a revolution against anarchy, the political anarchy, and despotism. So, at the time of the French Revolution, France was being ruled by uh, France was a monarchy. Time of its revolution, France was basically a monarchy and was ruled by a ruling dynasty called the Bourbon dynasty. So, at the time of the French Revolution, 1789, France was being ruled by a dynasty called the Bourbon dynasty. The rulers of Bourbon dynasty uh, were quite ruthless. The rulers of the Bourbon dynasty, they were not just ruthless; they were inefficient as well. So basically, the rulers of French, the rulers of the Bourbon dynasty were ruthless. So the corruption in the administration uh, in the Bourbon dynasty, the corruption in the administration during the rule of the Bourbons was rampant. Repeat, I was referring to the point that the Bourbon dynasty rulers were not just ruthless; they were also inefficient. In other words, they fought numerous wars uh, and lost many of them. They were spending lots of money, all of those wars. Um, the French Revolution was also a revolution against the social and economic inequalities. Was also a revolution against the social economic inequalities. So this revolution was taken up by the common people of France. 1789, unable to bear with the political anarchy and the socio and economic inequalities, the common people of France revolted against monarchy. So it resulted this revolt, this revolution of 1789, the French Revolution of 1789, resulted in the downfall of the Bourbon dynasty, and it resulted in emerging. In it resulted it resulted in the downfall of the Bourbon dynasty. This is what happened in 9. Now let us take a detailed look at the causes of the French Revolution. Why did this French Revolution happen? Overall, I gave you a brief introduction relating to the French Revolution. Now let us take a detailed look at the causes responsible for the outbreak of the French Revolution. So we will be discussing the causes 2 points. Let us understand the first cause, that is the social factors. First factor responsible for the French Revolution was the existing social system or the existing social factors. Basically, the French society was a highly unjust society. Basically, a very, very unjust society. The French society broadly comprised of 3 estates. The French society was broadly divided into 3 estates. First estate, the second estate, and the third estate. The first estate largely comprised of the clergy, particularly the higher clergy. Here, clergy, that is, the people who are associated with religion, the people who are associated with the church, the clergy. So basically, I told you the French society was a very unjust society. Basically, the French society was divided into 3 estates. The first estate comprised largely of the higher clergy. At a point. The second estate comprised of the nobility. Nobility is basically the land owning community, landlord class. They were the large landlords of France. Also, these were the high level officers working in the Bourbon administration. It also includes the ministers. It also includes the large landlords. At a point. So it is referred to as basically the second estate. The third estate was basically a very heterogeneous group comprising of the commoners such as the peasants, the workers, the artisans, and also the bourgeoisie. Bourgeoisie is basically the middle class. So basically, the bourgeoisie itself was very heterogeneous. It comprised of teachers, it comprised of doctors, it comprised of lawyers, comprised of writers, etc. So let me repeat. The third estate comprised of the commoners. The third estate was a very heterogeneous class comprised of common people like the peasants, the workers, the artisans, and importantly, it also comprised of the bourgeoisie. Bourgeoisie itself was a very heterogeneous class. It comprised of teachers, doctors, lawyers, and other technicians. Basically, the bourgeoisie happened to be the people of these were the educated sections. The bourgeoisie happened to be the educated sections at the point. So they were also emerging as influential sections in the French society. They being educated, they being the educated people, they were gradually emerging as a very influential section within the French society. Now take a look at the social factor once again. I just told you that the French society was a highly society. So the French society was broadly comprised of three estates. Estate 1, Estate 2, Second Estate, First Estate, Second Estate, and Third Estate. But the point is, the first and the second estate put together comprise only 2% of French population. The first and the second estate put together comprise only 2% of the French population. Yet they owned 20% of the lands in France. They just comprise of 2% of the French population, both the clergy and the nobility put together. For example, the clergy, they accounted only for about 0.5% of the French population. The nobility, on the other hand, accounted for 1.5% of the entire French population. Both of them put together, they accounted for about 2% of the entire French population. But more importantly, they had ownership, they owned 20% of the lands, agricultural lands available in France. More importantly, the members of the first and the second estate were exempted from taxes. They were exempted from taxes. Basically, they are, in fact, the rich sections of the society. The clergy and the nobility, they were the rich sections of the society. They had uh, they had the capacity to pay the taxes, but they were exempted from paying any kind of taxes to the government, to the rulers. Hence, they were referred to as privileged class members. So the members of the first and second class are also referred to as the members of privileged class. Privileged class, because they were exempted from paying taxes. So they only accounted for 2% of French society, but owned 20% of the lands available in France. More importantly, they were exempted from paying taxes. On the other hand, 98% of the French population comprise of the third estate. 98%. Importantly, uh, these were the very common people, but yet they were reeling under the burden of taxation. So the common people, the members of the third estate, were the one who were reeling under the burden of taxation. They were they were the one who were paying taxes to the government, and importantly, they enjoyed little political power. So they had no access to the king. They enjoyed in fact, they had very little political power. And more importantly, they were the one who were paying all the taxes to the. So basically, the first reason for the outbreak of the French Revolution in 1789 was the very unjust social system that was in place till 1789. So the unjust social system existing in France in 1789 became reason number one for the outbreak of French Revolution. That's the point. So basically, the people of the third estate uh, uh, got tired. They got tired of this unjust system, and therefore they rose in revolt against the king, against the ruler of France in 1789. This is the first reason. I already told you At the time of the French Revolution, France was a monarchy, was under the control of a dynasty called Bourbon dynasty. The ruler of France in 1789 was one Mr. Louis XVI. Louis XVI was the ruler of France at the time of French Revolution. So Louis, this was the term by which the rulers of France were referred to. Basically, the rulers of France were referred to as Louis I, Louis II. So similarly, the ruler of France at the time of French Revolution was Louis XVI. The point. So the first factor for French Revolution we have just discussed. Let us discuss the second factor. Second factor is the political factor. I just explained to you that the ruling dynasty of France at the time of revolution was the Bourbon dynasty. The rulers of this dynasty were referred to as the Louis, and those Louis, they were not just inefficient, they were not just despotic, they were not just ruthless, they were also very, very inefficient rulers. They were basically inefficient rulers. They fought, lost numerous wars in Europe. As a result, they were wasting a lot of the public money on all of those wars. Let me explain this point once again. The point is, the Louis, the rulers of France, were ruthless and inefficient rulers. They fought and lost numerous wars. As a result, a lot of public money was getting wasted. So corruption, the administration was quite rampant during the Louis rule. So basically, the corruption was quite rampant during the time period of the Louis at a point. So they were also fighting and losing many wars. For example, it was during the time period of the Louis that France participated in the 7 Year War. Basically, the 7 Year War was a war fought in United States of America. Was a war fought between Britain and France for domination and control of the colonies of North American continent. Basically, uh, till 1763 AD, France also had its colonies North American continent, and Britain also had colonies in North American continent. So uh, a war broke out between France and Britain in 1756 AD, and it was fought till 1760. We call this war as the 7 Years. This war was fought for this war was fought between Britain and France for domination and control of North America. So eventually, in this war, France was brutally defeated. So basically, 7 Year War, the French rulers Louis were brutally defeated. So as a result, it resulted in massive debt and financial strain on the French economy. So basically, they participated in the war, but they lost the war. But as a result of which was it resulted in a great strain on the economy of the French. It resulted in a great strain on the French. So the French rulers were also leading a very lavish life. They were spending large sums of public money uh, for their lavish lifestyle. At a point. So, for example, the Louis at the time of the revolution was Louis XVI. His wife was a lady by name Mary Antoinette, and she was known for spending large sums of money uh, 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 for her lavish lifestyle. So basically, the whole point which I'm trying to convey is the second reason for the outbreak of the French Revolution is the political factor. But which political factor? The Louis were very, very uh, ruthless and inefficient rulers. They were fighting numerous wars in which they were getting defeated, as a result of which a lot of public money began to get wasted. Second, they were also spending large sums of money for their lavish lifestyle. That's the point. Third, corruption was also at an all-time peak during the Louis rule, during the Louis time period. So basically, as a result of all of their action, the French economy was in deep crisis. The French economy was in deep crisis by 1780. So the inefficient rule of the Louis is is considered as one of the reason for the outbreak of the French Revolution in 17. Basically, as a result of the rule of the Louis, the economy of France began to take a hit. By 1789, France was in deep economic trouble. The people of France held Louis and their policies responsible for their economic trouble. Therefore, they rose in revolt against the Louis. The point. In fact, after this revolt, after the revolution of 1789, the 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 monarchy, the absolute monarchy in France came to an end. The absolute monarchy in France came to an end. This is what happened. So the second reason for the outbreak of a French Revolution is the political factor. Come to the third factor. Third factor is intellectual factor. So undoubtedly, any revolution actually is preceded by revolution in the realm of ideas. So the actual revolution in most of the cases is preceded by revolution in the realm of ideas, what we call as intellectual revolution. So in this context, this connection, France was lucky to have numerous thinkers like Voltaire, Rousseau, Montesquieu, and physiocrats who basically began to question the authority of the monarchy. They also began to minutely uh, scrutinize the role of the church, the lack of the personal freedoms. Let me repeat this point once again. The actual revolution, in most cases, is always all the time preceded by a revolution in the realm of ideas. So, in the point is, in this connection, in this context, France undoubtedly was lucky to have numerous intellectuals, numerous thinkers like Voltaire, Rousseau, Montesquieu, etc. These thinkers began to analyze the problems plaguing France. These thinkers, in their writings, began to minutely scrutinize the problems plaguing France. So they began in their writings uh, they started to provide solutions to to they in their writings, these things, their writings to uh, provide solutions to the problems that were being faced by France. That's the point. So the point is, these writers, through their writings, laid a solid ideological groundwork for the 1780 French. Point is, these thinkers, through their writings, laid a solid groundwork for the 1789 French. So I already discussed with you. I just highlighted the names of Voltaire, Rousseau, and Montesquieu, as well as the physiocrats. Let us understand the role of each of these thinkers. Basically, the first of these thinkers is Voltaire. Voltaire basically became a bitter critique of the church. He became the bitter critique of the church at the point. So he began to criticize the corrupt practices of the church. Became a bitter critique of the church. He began to criticize the corrupt practices of the church. He came up with a doctrine called doctrine of supremacy of reason. Voltaire came up with a doctrine called the doctrine of supremacy of reason. Basically, he gave a call to the people to not have any kind of blind beliefs, gave a call to the people to reject blind beliefs, gave a call to the people to develop a rational outlook. Basically, he gave a call to the people to give importance to reason. He gave a call to the people to reject blind beliefs. Gave a call to the people to develop a rational outlook. So basically, uh, in the sphere of reason, the contribution of Voltaire is undoubtedly unparalleled. So in the sphere of reason, gave basically Voltaire uh, promoted the idea that people should reason everything before accepting anything. Reason and accept was the slogan given by Voltaire. So, in the sphere of reason, the contribution of Voltaire is undoubtedly unparalleled. Then we have Rousseau. Rousseau basically he he attacked the despotic rule of the Bourbons. He criticized and attacked the despotic rule of the Bourbons. He he came up with a new doctrine called the doctrine of the supremacy of general will. The doctrine of supremacy of general will. So basically, he argued that uh, the the authority, the power lies with the common people, the general people, and not with the monarchs. The authority shall lie with the people and not with the monarchs. So basically, he also wrote a book known as Social Contract. Rousseau also wrote a book known as Social Contract, in which he argued that the sovereignty lies with the people and not with the monarch. He wrote a book called Social Contract, in which he argued that the sovereignty lies with the people and not with them. Basically, this work, Social Contract, became a gospel for direct democracy. Basically, he began to question the authority. Basically, uh, Rousseau questioned the authority of the monarchs. He began to argue that the real authority lies with the people and not with monarchy. And through his continuous attacks on monarchy, he tried his best to enlighten the people. He tried his best to enlighten common people. And so his work, Social Contract, is considered to be a landmark book. His work, Social Contract, is considered to be a gospel for direct democracy. Gospel for direct democracy. So that was he was another important thinker who also had a profound role to play, in shaping the thinking of the people of France. Third is we have Montesquieu. Montesquieu, he proposed a doctrine called doctrine of supremacy of law. Doctrine of supremacy of law. So Montesquieu was in favor of a constitutional monarchy. So Montesquieu was in favor of a constitutional monarchy and not absolute monarchy. So Montesquieu was of the view that everyone in the society should. The point is, the Montesquieu was of the view that the king should carry out his administration not on his whims and fancies, but by remaining within the framework of a law. Let me repeat this point once again. Montesquieu was in favor of uh, a constitutional monarchy. He came up with a new doctrine called doctrine of supremacy of law. He was of the view that the king has to carry out his administration not on the basis of whims and fancies, but basis of written laws. Basically, he was of the view that the king has to run his administration strictly within the framework of laws. That's my point. So basically, he came up with a new doctrine called the doctrine of supremacy of law, in which he argued that the ultimate authority lies with the law. That is, king also has to abide by the laws. That was the argument put forward by Montesquieu. He also he wrote a book called The Spirit of Laws. Montesquieu wrote a book called The Spirit of Laws, in which he advocated separation of powers to prevent tyranny of the monarchs. So basically, Montesquieu wrote a book called The Spirit of Laws, in which he proposed the separation of powers. He argued that the rulers would turn tyrants if all the powers are concentrated in their hands. So therefore, he called for separation of powers between all the three wings of the government, that is the legislative wing, executive wing, and judicial wing. So he gave a call for the separation of powers. He argued that all the three wings of the government has to function within the framework of law. This is what he called as the doctrine of supremacy. Then we have another category of intellectuals called the physiocrats. Physiocrats are basically the economists, French economists, group of French economists in the 18th century. Basically, these are a group of economists the 18th century France. So these physiocrats were in favor of a free market economy. These physiocrats were in favor of a free market economy. These physiocrats severely criticized the government for its interference in economic matters, such as trade restrictions. So basically, the physiocrats, who are basically the economists of 18th France, uh, severely criticized the French government for its involvement in economic matters. They famously uh, proposed a concept called laissez-faire. They famously proposed a concept called laissez-faire, meaning meaning laissez-faire, in which he argued that the government intervention in the economy should be minimum. Which basically they argued that the government should withdraw itself from economic matters. Under the concept of laissez-faire, the physiocrats argued that the government should not have much role to play in the economic matter. At a point. So basically, they criticized the French government for its heavy involvement, for his heavy interference in economic matters. They wanted the uh, they wanted a free market uh, in France. They were in favor of establishment of a free market economy in France. So the whole point which I'm trying to convey is, I I just told you in the opening remarks itself that any revolution most of the time preceded by a revolution in the realm of ideas. So basically, these were uh, France in the 18th century AD was lucky to have a number of thinkers, and these thinkers began to carefully analyze the problems affecting French, the problems being faced by France. In their writings, they began to provide solutions to the problems of France. So, through their writings, uh, that is, be it Rousseau, be it the physiocrats, be it Montesquieu, or be it Voltaire, through their writings, provided solid groundwork. Uh, they provided a solid ideological groundwork for the revolution to take place in 1789. So that's about the intellectual factors. The fourth factor is the impact of American. So American Revolution happened between 1775 to 1783. So like India, uh, America was also a British colony. So the people of America, unable to bear with the economic exploitation of Britain, revolted against Britain. made and secured independence uh, in 1776 AD. Let me repeat this point once again. Like India, America was also a British colony, unable to bear with the economic exploitation of Britain. The people of America revolted, secured independence from the British. We call this as the American Revolution, which was fought between 5 to 1780. So basically, uh, this American Revolution happened just a decade before the French Revolution. So when did French Revolution happen? In 1780. The American Revolution happened just a decade before, because the American Revolution started in 1775, ended in 1780. So basically, just a decade before the American Revolution happened. As a result, after the American Revolution, America, so at the end of the revolution, at the end of the American Revolution, America uh, declared independence from British. It became, in fact, the first country to come out of the colonial rule. So basically, the American Revolution served as a great inspiration to the French. The American Revolution, which happened just a decade before the French Revolution, served as a great inspiration to the French people. The French people began to realize that if the people of America could revolt against the British monarchy and secure independence, why not the French people repeat the same in France? Was a question which many French people began to ask. The point is, I just told you the American Revolution served as an inspiration to the French people. How? Because this American Revolution happened just a decade before the French Revolution, and the French people began to as to question, the French people began to question as to why the French people cannot repeat the same in France what the people of America had done against their monarchy, that is Britain. Because Britain was also a monarchy. The people of America revolted against monarchy and secured independence. So, if that be the case, the people of France also began to argue as to why they cannot repeat the same against their own monarchs. So, basically, the American Revolution, in a way, it served, it did had great impact on the French. It served as an inspiration for the French people. The American Revolution served as an inspiration for the French people uh, to repeat the same against their own monarchs in 1789. So the impact of American Revolution undoubtedly also have a role to play in the French Revolution of 1789. Come to the last and the important factor for the French Revolution. One is the economic factor. So last and the most important reason for the French Revolution is economic factor. Basically, by 1788, just a year before the outbreak of the French, so France was facing severe financial. By 1788, that is just a year before, France was in a deep economic crisis. So basically, the the France was uh, reeling under the burden of huge debts. The point is, by 1788, France was reeling in severe financial. At the point, France was facing severe financial crisis. France was reeling under the burden of huge debts. Economy of France was in great trouble. More importantly, in late 1780s, that is in 1787 and 88, so monsoons failed, and as a result, uh, the harvest was very poor. So uh, the point is in late 80s, in late 1780s, because of a poor harvest, the availability of uh, poor harvest of the late 1780s France resulted in food shortages. There was a rising inflation. There was, in fact, not much availability of food in the market. The living conditions of the people, particularly the common people, uh, became miserable. The living conditions of the common people began to get worsened. That's the point. So the point is, by 1788, uh, the people of France, the common people of France, uh, lost all hope in monarchy, absolute monarchy. That's the point. So the people of France were in great trouble because the point is, the monarchs, Louis, uh, was not taking any proper steps to lessen their burden. That's the point. So the whole point which I'm trying to say is, by 1788, France was facing severe financial crisis. Financial crisis was due to uh, increased debt burden on France. The point. So I already explained why debt burden on France increased, because France had fought numerous wars, which it has large sums of money. It not just fought wars; it got defeated in the war, and it had to spend large sums of money, and that explains the reason for the high debt in France. And importantly, the point is, unfortunately, in late 1780s, uh, the harvest was very very poor. As a result, the availability of food market declined substantially. The the inflation was at an all time peak. So the conditions of the common people began to worsen, and by 1788, by the end of 1788, people in fact lost all hope in monarchy. People basically began to question uh, the need for having a monarchy. The big people lost their hope in the monarchy. Point is, the economic factors. Basically, the people of France uh, realized that there is absolutely no use in having a. So the economic troubles became the immediate factor for the outbreak of the French Revolution in 1789. So basically, as the financial crisis in as the financial crisis in France increased, immediately the French ruler Louis XVI appointed physiocrats to suggest him measures to bring France out of trouble. So let me repeat, the point is, the Louis, the ruler of France at the time of French Revolution, was Louis XVI. The view to overcome the economic problems, began appointing physiocrats as the Director General of Finance Department. So basically, the Louis XVI, the view to overcome the economic crisis, began appointing physiocrats as a DG, that is a Director General of Finance Department. In simple terms, physiocrats began to be appointed by Louis XVI as a finance minister. One such physiocrat who was appointed as the finance minister by Louis XVI was Turgot. And the Turgot immediately made a couple of proposals, such as, say, he proposed free trade, he proposed austerity measures to be taken up by the king. He also proposed, importantly, taxation of the privileged classes. Who are privileged class? Basically, the members of the first and the second class. They are referred to as a privileged class. So Turgot proposed taxation of the privileged classes. At a point. But the point is, the privileged classes were quite influential. They were very, very influential class. So they brought pressure on the king and got Turgot removed as the finance minister. So basically, under the pressure from the privileged classes only, Turgot, who was basically appointed by the king himself as the finance minister, was removed as finance minister. Thereafterwards, immediately Targat was replaced by another theocrat as a finance minister. This time, Necker was appointed as a finance. The whole point which I'm trying to convey is by 1788, France was in deep economic crisis. You know the reason for economic crisis, and to overcome this economic crisis, uh, Louis XVI began appointing physiocrats as a finance minister. The first physiocrat who was appointed as finance minister was Targat, but immediately he was removed from post of a finance minister under the pressure of the privileged class. And later he was replaced by another physiocrat by name Necker. So Necker, by and large, he reiterated the proposals of Targat. He reiterated most of the proposals of Targat. So Necker reiterated. Necker is another finance minister. So by the mid of 1789, by the mid of 1789, economic crisis France further deepened. Economic crisis in France further deepened. In fact, uh, French government was on the verge of bankruptcy. Point is, by the mid of 17, the French government was on the verge of bankruptcy. So therefore, once again, Necker proposed imposing taxes on all the people of France, including the privileged classes. So by the mid of 1789, France was in economic crisis. In fact, the French government was on the bank of bankruptcy, and therefore, as a solution, as a solution to the problem, Necker once again proposed imposing taxes on all the people of France, including on the privileged classes. So, to discuss this proposal of Necker, the Assembly of Notables were summoned. To discuss this proposal of Necker, the Assembly of Notables was summoned. So, basically, the Assembly of Notables was a group comprising of influential nobles, clergy, and high officials. Basically, the Assembly of Notables was convened by the king in 1789 itself, 87 itself. This, this Assembly of Notables was a group comprising of influential clergy and the nobles and high officials, high French officials. At the point. So basically, this Assembly of Notables was convened to discuss the proposals put forward by. But the point is, the Assembly of Notables, on the other hand, argued that the king does not have the authority to impose taxes on the privileged class. Basically, the Assembly of Notables argued that the only authority who can impose classes, which can impose taxes on the privileged class, are the only authority which can impose the taxes on the people was the Estate General. Let me repeat this point once again. So basically, the king summoned the Assembly of the Notables. Basically, the Assembly of the Notables was a group comprising of influential clergy and the nobles. At a point. But the Assembly of the Notables, on the other hand, argued that the king does not have the authority to impose the taxes on the privileged class. The Assembly of the Notables argued that the only authority which can decide the question of taxes on the privileged classes was the Estate General. So, what is this Estate General? This Estate General was basically the traditional legislative body of France. Basically, there used to be a traditional legislative body which was called as Estate General. So basically, the Assembly of Notables argued that the only authority which can decide on the question of taxes on the privileged classes was the Estate General. The point is, this Estate General was closed since 1614. Till 1614, this Estate General functioned, but since 1614, the Estate General remained closed. But the Assembly of the Notables kept arguing that the only authority which decided on the question of imposition access on privileged classes was his Estate General. So therefore, point is immediately the king, that is Louis XVI, took a decision. The point is, by the mid of 1789, the economic crisis in France was mounting. I told you that France was on the verge of bankruptcy. So the Assembly of the Notables did not agree for imposition of additional. It did not agree for the imposition of taxes on us. On the other hand, they recommended the king for summoning of the Estate General, which they argued was the only authority that can decide on the question of imposition of taxes on privileged. So therefore, left with no choice, the king, that is Louis XVI, decided to summon the Estate General. But the point is, this Estate General remained closed till 1614. So uh, therefore, the king decided to conduct elections to the Estate General. Told you, Estate General was the traditional legislative body of France that existed till 1614 AD. So therefore, the point is, since 1614, the Legislative Council, that is Estate General, remained closed. So therefore, uh, the King Louis XVI appointed Necker to conduct elections to the Estate General. Necker, I just told you, was the finance minister. The same individual was also tasked with the responsibility of conducting elections to the Estate General. So, as ordered by the king, Necker conducted elections, and after elections, the Estate General was organized into three estates. The Estate General, the traditional legislative body of France, was reorganized. It was organized into three estates: first estate, and second estate, and third estate. So the first estate comprised the representatives of the clergy, and there were about 300 members who were elected as the representatives of the clergy. So basically, the first estate comprised of 300 members, and these 300 members were elected as representatives of the clergy. Basically, they represented clergy. The second estate also comprised of 300 members, and these 300 members were elected as the representatives of the nobility. Nobility, basically the landlord class. And third estate comprised of 600 members. Basically, they were elected as the representatives of the commoners, peasants, artisans, workers, as well as the bourgeois. So the whole point which I'm trying to convey is, by the mid of 1789, France was in a deep economic crisis. The king, uh, the Assembly of the Notables, which is a group of influential clerics, influential influential group of uh, influential clergy and nobles, recommended the king to summon the Estate General, and they argued that the only Estate General had the capacity or had the authority to uh, decide on the question of imposition of the tax. So, as uh, advised by the as advised by the uh, as advised by the Assembly of the Notables, the king took steps to reorganize the Estate General. He took a decision to convene the Estate General, and since the Estate General did not meet since 1614, the king also ordered Necker, the French minister, to take steps to conduct elections. As ordered by the king, Necker conducted elections, and the three estates were elected. members of the three estates were elected. The first estate, second estate, and third estate. You know, the first estate comprised of 300 members, second estate comprised of 300 members, third estate 600 members. This estate was finally reorganized in the middle of 1789. So this estate met, and once the estate general met, immediately there were conflicts between the members of first and second estate on one hand, and the members of the third estate on the other hand. So let me repeat this point once again. The estate general was convened. Estate general is the traditional legislative body of France. A state general was convened. Immediately, a dispute broke out between the first and the second estates on the one hand, the members of the third estate on the other. What is this dispute? Basically, the first and the second estates were in favor of voting by estate. The dispute was over the question of voting. The dispute was over the question of voting. I just told you there were three estates: estate 1, estate 2, this is estate 1, estate 2, and so the dispute was over the question of voting. Basically, the members of the first and the second estate were in favor of voting by estate, whereas the members of the third estate were in favor of voting by head. Voting by head. That's the point. So traditionally, what happened? Each estate had one vote. Each estate was declared as one vote, meaning that the first and the second estates could always outvote the third estate. So basically, if first estate is regarded as one vote, second estate is regarded as another vote, third estate is regarded as one vote, for a decision to be taken, there must be support of 2 out of the 3 votes. Minimum support of 2 out of the 3 votes. So for example, if any question is put for voting, the question was decided on the basis of the majority support. So if the members of the first and the second estate support any legislative proposal, that will be automatically be passed. Vice versa. Say for example, if members of the first estate and second estate, if they reject any proposal, in such a case, even if all the members of third estate, even if they are in favor of any particular legislation, such a legislation can never be passed. The point, because the point is, mind you, the first estate had just 300 members, second estate had 300 members, the third estate on the other hand 600 members. So, but the point is, the voting was not done by head. Right from the beginning, voting was not done by head, it was voting by estate. That the system was in practice in France. The whole point which I'm trying to convey is, as soon as the estate general was convened, a dispute broke out between the members of the three estates. The dispute was over the question of voting. The members of the first and the second estate were in favor of voting by estate, whereas the members of the third estate were in favor of voting by head. Voting by head. Yes? That is what they demanded. That's the point. So, but the point is, the members of the first and the second estate were opposed to the demands of the members of the state. As a result, it resulted in a deadlock. It basically resulted in a deadlock. That's the point. So basically, the members of the third estate uh, remained quite unrelenting in their stand. They were in favor of voting by head, not in favor of voting by estate, and they remained very, very unrelenting in their stand. And therefore, it resulted in a deadlock. And therefore, immediately Louis XVI decided to suspend the Estate General, which was meeting after a gap of about 175 years. So basically, the Estate General last met only in 1614. Elections were conducted, and the Estate General was convened in 1789. So basically, the Estate General was convened after a gap of about 175 years. But there was a dispute between the members of the three estates for the question of voting. So it resulted in a deadlock. The talks were not moving anywhere at all. So therefore, the Louis XVI decided to once again suspend, which was basically after 175 years. Immediately, an incident happened known as tennis court oath, and this event happened on 20th June 1780. Tennis court oath 1780. June date is also important. 20th June 17. So basically, uh, on 20th June 1789, the members of the third estate found the gates of the estate general locked. Basically, the meetings in the estate general have been happening the beginning of June, but on 20th June 1789, the members of the third estate found the gates of the estate general locked. Basically, the gates of the estate general were locked upon the orders of the king, because of the deadlock, because of disagreements between members of the three estates, the king decided to suspend estate general. In fact, the estate general was suspended, and when the members of the third estate went to the estate general on 20th June, they found the gates of the closed. Immediately, the the members of the third estates, without dispersing, they met. The point is, they refused to disperse. Instead, the members of the third estate met in the nearby tennis court. So, just nearby to that of the estate general, there was a tennis court. So, rather than dispersing from the estate general, the members of the third estate met in the nearby tennis court and took an oath which became famous as a tennis court oath. They took an oath which became famous as a tennis court oath. Happened on 20th June 1789. Point. So the point is, tennis court was taken. Take a look at the points, the resolutions passed in this particular oath. They decided to continue their meetings despite the disapproval of the king. Basically, the king suspended the estate general, but the members of the third estate decided to continue with their meeting, decided to meet despite suspension of the estate general. Second, they decided to prepare a new constitution on their own. It basically, the members of the third estate decided to prepare a new constitution on their own. They decided to form a new assembly, new legislative body called national. So basically, the members of the third estate decided to form new legislative body which they named as national. Basically, the members of the third estate claimed that they are the true representatives. They claimed themselves as the true representatives of the nation because the third estate represented 98% of the total French population, whereas the members of the first and second estate represented only 2% of the French population. So therefore, the third estate claimed or declared itself as assembly. Basically, they decided to form. Basically, the members of the third estate decided to form a new legislative body called a nation. Okay? In fact, the third assembly, the third estate itself declared as a national assembly, and they claimed themselves as the true representatives of the nation because they represented 98% of total of the French population. 98% of. Then what was the reaction of the king? What was the reaction response? Basically, the Louis XVI viewed the actions of the Estate General as a defiance of his authority. Basically, the Louis viewed the actions of the Third Estate. Louis viewed the actions of the Third Estate as defiance of his authority. Immediately, he ordered the troops crush the National Assembly, suppress the National. Basically, he ordered his troops to suppress the national assembly. Get the point. So, upon the orders of the king, the troops, the French troops, uh, began taking steps to crush the national. Basically, the third estate itself declared it as the nation. Right? In fact, the third estate got transformed into the national assembly, and upon the orders of the king, the troops began to suppress the national. And this decision of Louis to suppress the or the third estate is considered to be the immediate reason for the outbreak of the French Revolution. This decision of Louis is considered to be an immediate reason for the outbreak of French Revolution. So immediately an incident happened in response to the activities of the French troops. An incident happened known as fall of Bastille. In response to the actions of the French troops, event occurred called as the fall of Bastille. So this fall of Bastille was basically a fortress, was also a prison in Paris. Basically, a fortress prison in Paris. It was in this fortress prison that all the anti-Bourbon, all the people who opposed the Bourbon rule were imprisoned and tortured. So basically, the people who were opposed to the Bourbon rule were imprisoned and tortured in this Bastille. It was basically a fortress prison located in prison. All the people who were opposed to the Bourbon rule were imprisoned and tortured at the Bastille. So basically, the Bastille, the fort Bastille was seen as a symbol of tyranny. It was seen as a symbol of Bourbon tyranny, because it was in that fortress that the people who were opposed to the Bourbon rule were being tortured relentlessly. At a point. So therefore, on 14th July 1789, 14th July 1789, common people of France, that is the members of the Third Estate, attacked Bastille Fort and destroyed it. Basically, attacked Bastille Fort and destroyed. They also set free all the prisoners of the Bastille Fortress. So basically, they attacked the Bastille Fortress, destroyed it. They also released all the prisoners from at a point. So basically, the fall of, we call this as the fall of Bastille. This fall of Bastille was seen as a victory over tyranny and monarchy's unchecked powers. Seen as a victory over tyranny and monarchy's unchecked powers. So this event is also a very, very important. Happened on 14th July 1789. So what is the significance of this fall of Bastille? Take a look at it. So basically, the fall of Bastille resulted in the end of absolute monarchy. So it was after this event, it was after the fall of Bastille, the monarch surrendered. That is, Louis XVI surrendered. He also agreed for the establishment of a constitutional monarchy. So basically, monarchy was not completely abolished. After the fall of Bastille, monarch surrendered. The monarch agreed for the establishment of a constitutional monarchy in France. So, what is the significance of the fall of Bastille? This event marked the beginning of the collapse of absolute monarchy in France. So, this event marks collapse of absolute monarchy in France, because it was after this event constitutional monarchy came to be established in France. This event also marks the end of social inequalities. It also marks the end of social inequalities, because till 1789, the privileged classes were exempted from paying taxes. But after the fall of Bastille, taxes began to be imposed and collected from all sections of the French. So it also resulted in the end of a feudal system. This was because the members of the first and the second estate, though they accounted for only 20% of the French population, they owned nearly 20% of country's land. They owned 20% of a country's land. So after the fall of Bastille, all the lands belonging to the first and second estate uh, were taken over by the government, distributed among the common people. The point is, after the fall of Bastille, the lands that were owned by the members of the first and second estate were confiscated, and later they were distributed among common people. So therefore, the fall of Bastille also signaled the end of a feudal system in it also signaled the end of a feudal system in the whole point which I'm trying to convey is this fall of Bastille happened on 14th July 17. So even to this day, the 14th July celebrated as Bast as Bastille Day. Even today, 14th July here as celebrated as Bastille Day in France, basically a public holiday. This day is celebrated to commemorate the revolution in France. The day 14th July is celebrated each year as a Bastille Day. It is a holiday. It is celebrated to commemorate the uh, the revolution in France. So these are the reasons for the outbreak of. So I told you, I I explained to you that France was uh, then ruled by a dynasty called Bourbon dynasty. Rulers of this Bourbon dynasty called the Louis. So I explained you the reasons for the revolution. Basically, the French Revolution happened in 17. I took you through the various factors responsible for the French Revolution. We discussed the factors about five different heads. One is social factors. Basically, there were too many social France. Second, second factor which we discussed was second factor which we discussed was the political factor. The third factor was the intellectual factor. The fourth factor which we discussed was uh, fourth factor which we discussed was the impact of American. The fifth factor which we discussed was the deep economic crisis in which France was involved in 70. So thereafterwards, the events that unfolded uh, in a short span of time from the beginning of 1780 till 14th of July 1789 resulted in the outbreak of the French Revolution. Repeat, the events that unfolded in a quick span of time from the beginning of 1789 till 14th July 1789 resulted in overthrow of absolute monarchy. So in 1789, France was declared constitutional, and the fall of Bastille signaled many signaled the end of absolute monarchy in France. It signaled the end of social inequalities. It also signaled the end of feudalism at a point. So that's about the French Revolution. In case if a question is asked on the factors, these are the points which you think. Of course, you cannot afford to write summarize everything and write in about 150. So that's all about French Revolution. Tomorrow's class will take take a look at some other aspects of the French. That's all for today. See you in next class. Kindly subscribe to the channel.